Hello spooky people, and welcome to this festive edition of In the Maw of Thanatos, where I talk about all types of horror, both old and new, because that's what I do. It's the holiday season, and as you can see,
I've spared no expense.
the nights are long and it's bloody freezing. But this is the time for peace, love, and goodwill to all men, women, and, well, let's just say everyone. And also presents. Mostly it's about the presents. Let's be honest. In this Christmas Spooktacular, I'll be reviewing not one, not two, not four. What's wrong with you? Are you crazy? I'm doing 3 films, okay? I'm sorry to disappoint you. Today, I'll be looking at Black Christmas, and you guessed it, Black Christmas. That's right, I'm reviewing 3 versions of the same film. Buckle up, it's going to be a long one. So creep out of your attic and start heavy breathing. It's time for Black Christmas. We're starting where all good stories do, and that's at the beginning. More accurately, 1974. And with another classic that I've never seen. Yet again, shocking, I know. The film starts with a POV shot from the perspective of our killer as he sneaks into a sorority house, where the girls are getting ready for Christmas. Some are going home for the holidays, and others are staying. As the killer breaks in, we're introduced to some of our cast of characters. There's Jess, played by Olivia Hussey, who is our main heroine, and also pregnant. More on that later. Margot Kidder, who in 4 years' time would become Lois Lane in Richard Donner's Superman. She is Barb, the resident trickster and alcoholic of the group. Phil, played by Andrea Martin, who also appears in a later version of the film, and our first victim Claire, who's played by Lynn Griffin, packing her things to go home for the holidays, while a concerned crab looks on anxiously.
Who is that?
After our mysterious intruder breaks into the house, he swiftly dispatches Claire and gives us our poster. Lastly, we're introduced to the house mother, Mrs. Mack, who has a ridiculous number of booze bottles stashed around the house, and might possibly be my favourite character.
I didn't send my daughter here to be drinking and picking up boys. Tough shit. These broads have the leaning tower of Pisa if they can get up there.
The next day, the women realise that Claire is missing after she fails to meet up with her father. They go to the police, who are largely uninterested, and they determine that she is probably shacked up with some guy. Her boyfriend is less than pleased by this comment from Sergeant Nash, who is a complete idiot.
I don't know if it's any consolation, but 90% of the time, girls are reported missing from the college. They're at a cabin somewhere with a boyfriend.
Thanks. But that's not much consolation.
Oh, I almost forgot, the house is also receiving creepy phone calls. Sinister, disturbing ones that are more bizarre than threatening. Mostly.
He's expanded his act. Could that be one person? No, Claire, that's the Mormon Tabernacle Choir doing their annual obscene phone call.
Because of these calls and the maybe unrelated disappearance of a young girl, Nancy's dad from A Nightmare on Elm Street gets involved.
A high school girl's been murdered. Mr. Harrison's daughter is missing. And now at the house where she lives, the other girls are getting obscene phone calls. Don't you think we ought to look into it, Nash?
As he investigates and ridicules the incompetent desk sergeant, more of the sorority is bumped off, until they are whittled down to our final girl. It all sounds like a pretty straightforward and simple story, right?
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Okay, so not only is there the main plot about the mysterious killer murdering the women of the house, but there are a few seemingly unrelated subplots all going on at the same time. Firstly, we'll look at Barb's drinking problem. She spends almost the entire film drunk and makes some very questionable choices. From provoking the killer during one of his phone calls.
You want my fat cocktail? Oh, why don't you go find a wall socket and stick your tongue in it? That'll give you a charge. You fucking creep!
I'm going to kill you.
Giving the police a fake number when reporting Claire as missing.
Could you give me the number at the sorority house?
It's, Fellatio 20880.
as well as giving a kid sips of a hooch at a charity Santa event.
Some more, huh?
Yes, well, if we don't have any luck, I'll go to the police.
She also has a crack relationship with her mother, only staying at the house because her mum is spending time with her boyfriend. It's subtly established that her drinking is more than just Christmas cheer and has always been a problem. Ultimately, it does result in her death. Moving on, there's the incompetent handling of the case by the police throughout. A little bit prescient, at least until John Saxon gets involved. There's the missing and murdered child subplot, which may or may not be related to the sorority house murders. It's never outright stated in the film, but I think that the killer was looking for a place to hide when he broke into the house after murdering the little girl. Lastly, as mentioned before, there is Jess's pregnancy subplot, which brings up questions over choice and who has the final say in bringing a child into the world. Jess knows that she is pregnant before the start of the film, but hasn't told her boyfriend Peter, Keir Dulia. She's decided that she isn't ready to have a child and that she's going to have an abortion. When she tells Peter this, he basically flips his lid.
I'm pregnant.
Jess, that's fantastic.
I don't want it.
You don't want it?
No. I'm going to have an abortion.
You can't make a decision like that. You haven't even asked me.
I wasn't even going to tell you.
It's an interesting question, and the way that it's presented in the film forms the basis for a conversation to take place. All of these subplots may seem random, but they all play into the main storyline. They become crucial elements of the whole, and not just random forced text that takes over the plot for the sake of a message, like a certain later entry. Black Christmas was released in 1974 by Warner Brothers. It was directed by Bob Clark, who also made Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. Like most in the film industry, he started off in horror before moving on to more commercial projects, such as Porky's and A Christmas Story. He did, however, return to his horror roots towards the end of his career with the Baby Geniuses movies. It was made for $620,000 and brought in $4.1 million at the box office. Written by Ray Moore, who said that he was inspired by the 1960s urban legend, The Babysitter and the Man Upstairs. Moore also claimed that the story was inspired by a series of real murders that occurred around Christmas in Montreal. The original script was rewritten to the university setting by Timothy Bond. Additionally, Clark added humour and altered some of the dialogue, in particular Barb's drunkenness and Mrs. Mac, who he based off his aunt. She seems like she would have been a fun lady. The script is good. Really good. The pacing is consistent and it's actually funny in places. There are a couple of weird choices in terms of dialogue.
They scared the shit out of me.
Sorry, miss, but you do know there was a girl killed in the park tonight.
But, oh well. Acting-wise, I can't fault the film, other than to say that it almost feels too good for what it is. That isn't a complaint. It's just strange. The calibre of the actors is, well, great. Olivia Hussey previously played Juliet in Franco Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet, a film I know very well from my GCSEs. And she signed on based on the advice of a psychic. Keir Dulia was cast based on his performance in 2001 A Space Odyssey. His work on the film is solid, and he captures the torment of his character perfectly. In regards to Margot Kidder, she was drawn to the part of Barb because she was unconventional, wild, and out of control. And as I'm sure you all know, she would later become the most well-known version of the character Lois Lane. And finally, John Saxon. You can never go wrong with John Saxon. The kills are creative in a fairly minimal sense, and surprisingly, like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there is very little gore or on-screen bloodshed, with Clark choosing to deviate from the more graphic murder scenes that were in the original script, feeling instead that they would be more effective if toned down and not graphically shown on screen. Composer Carl Zitra I think that's how you pronounce it, has stated that the mysterious music was achieved by tying forks, combs and knives to piano strings and recording them onto an audio tape and slowing them down. Honestly, there is so much I could talk about with this film that's considered to be one of the earliest examples of the slasher genre. It inspired John Carpenter's Halloween and dramatically influenced the genre as a whole. Fun fact, it was supposedly one of Elvis Presley's favourite horror films, and he would watch it every year. Reportedly, his family kept the tradition alive by watching it every Christmas in his memory. Aww. Anywho, like I said, there is so much more I could talk about, but I still have 2 films to discuss. So let's move on to Black Christmas. This time the film starts in the sorority house where Claire is wrapping presents and writing Christmas cards. She gets bagged, like in the original, but in true 2000s remake tradition, they had to go bigger, and she also gets a pen in the eye. We are then transported to an asylum, where an inmate called Billy is being held. Every year he tries to escape, and this year is the year that he succeeds. Descending upon his old home, which is now the sorority house. In the first 10 minutes we see Billy's face.
I have a bad feeling about this.
The escape is interspersed with what passes for character introductions, as well as a bit of Billy's backstory. Okay, since the characters and the names are all different, here we go again. Our heroine is Kelly, played by Katie Cassidy, who would appear in another remake 4 years later, 2010's A Nightmare on Elm Street. All circling back 4 years, A Nightmare on Elm Street, all linked. All of it is linked. I need a conspiracy board. Maybe next time I do a multi-movie review. There's a subplot of Kelly's boyfriend Kyle having a sex tape of him and another sorority sister before they started dating. Lauren is Barb's replacement, although they seem to have dropped the alcoholic part of her character. I mean, she gets drunk, but with the film rushing to get through itself, there isn't any hint that it's a problem. There is a molestation scene right before she gets murdered, which I may be wrong, but I get the feeling that was pushed by the producers. I'll get to them later. I'm not going to show it for obvious reason. Buffy alumni Michelle Trachtenberg plays Melissa and doesn't really do that much in the movie. The most famous, or would become the most famous actress in the film, is Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I'm sure I don't need to list any of the things that she's done for you to know who she is. Andrea Martin from the original returns, this time not playing Phil, but playing Mrs. Mack. Unfortunately, like all the other characters, her personality is severely reduced, and seems to be there to serve only as a mouthpiece for the exposition. Speaking of exposition, Billy is given a lot of backstory. Far too much. He was born with an unspecified liver disease, which makes him jaundiced. His mother hated him and murders his father with her boyfriend. Billy catches them and is shut away in the attic. Not going into too much detail here, but he fathers a child with his mother called Agnes. Sometime later, he kills his mum and his stepdad and gouges out his sister-daughter's eye. A bit of unnecessary cannibalism later, the police turn up and arrest him. You know what all that means? That Billy's sister-daughter doesn't care about him eating her eye, and the pair end up working together as they kill their way through the sorority. To say that this is a remake of a film that helped define the rules of the slasher genre It follows so many tropes and standard patterns of just generic horror films, like the fake-out death of Billy and Agnes. Obviously, the creepy phone calls take place throughout.
I can see you. Everyone should be home for Christmas. Santa Claus is dead.
I know I've skipped a few characters, they're really not that interesting, but I'll circle back a little bit to Claire's half-sister Lee, who acts as the replacement for the father of Claire in the original film, and is much more involved in what transpires, especially the first of the two finales.
I see Billy still gets a Christmas present. Oh, this is new. It's not for Billy, it's for Alpha Kappa from Billy.
Lee is played by Kristen Cloak, who mostly does TV, but notably, she was in Final Destination. The first one. The good one. Okay, that's enough of that. I think you get the picture now. Black Christmas was released in 2006 by Dimension and MGM. One of those names should have triggered some alarm bells. The film was written and directed by Glenn Morgan, who is known for his work on the remake of Willard and for producing Final Destination 3. All of it is linked. Originally, he wanted to expand on some of the more ambiguous or implied elements of the original film. He received input from Bob Clark, receiving his blessing on the new version. And then, in come the Weinsteins. Ugh, fucking Weinsteins. They requested the ending be changed and demanded that more gore was put into the film. On the latter, as has been stated by people bigger and smarter than I, there is a lot to say for subtlety when it comes to gore in films. As I mentioned before, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is effective in making you think you've seen more than you actually do. They also shot a load of additional footage, only intended for promotional purposes. Translation: to falsely advertise the film. Fucking Weinsteins. The movie was made for $9 million and got $21.5 million at the box office. It was fairly panned by critics, which probably had a negative effect on public reception. Probably not so much on the horror community side of things, because we'll buy tickets for things that critics hate because they hate them, as well as releasing it on Christmas Day in the States, a little earlier in the UK. But I don't know about you, but as soon as Boxing Day rolls around, I don't really feel like watching Christmas films. The acting is mostly serviceable, it does the job, and is pretty standard for the most part, especially for the mid-2000s, but given what else was coming out around then, it was fine. Reportedly, Morgan approached Winstead at 4 AM in an airport after finishing Final Destination 3 with her. All of it is linked. Being a fan of the original, she obviously agreed. After a bit of consideration, because she'd just been in a horror film and didn't want to end up being stuck in the horror loop. Weirdly, in Japan, it was advertised as Final Destination. Once again, Billy was based on a real-life killer. This time, it was Ed Kemper, a serial killer whose mother locked him up in the basement. He later murdered her in revenge. Once again, there is plenty of trivia and background on this film that I could probably ramble on about it for the whole length of this video, whatever it turns out to be. But I won't, because it's time to move on to Black Christmas.
We're in the end game now.
Right, okay, Black Christmas 2019. Where do we begin? First off, this is a loose remake of Black Christmas. How loose? Oh, you'll see. Lindsay, yep, no Claire here, is walking home when she starts to receive threatening texts. Sorry, DMs. Thinking it's the guy walking behind her minding his own business, she legs it and runs straight into a masked and cloaked figure who chases her down and kills her with an icicle while she tries to make snow angels. And that right there shows how much of a remake this is not. It's just another exercise in brand recognition, trying to trick people into buying their product. Anyway, I've started, so I may as well continue. Riley, Imogen Poots, is our main character this time, a woman who was assaulted by her boyfriend the previous year. She starred in the awesome 28 Weeks Later and the just as fantastic Green Room. Elise Shannon is Chris, an activist who doesn't really seem to do anything other than petition against things, and is basically the entirety of her character. Next up is Marty, played by Lily Donahue, who has a boyfriend. That's basically all there is to her character, more or less. Finally, Jess, portrayed by Brittany O'Grady, finishes off the core group that the film focuses on. There's no house mother this time, so the only adults are bad guys. Oh, and it's here at the beginning where we at least get our obligatory crystal unicorn that tells us that it is most definitely a remake of Black Christmas. Okay, there are other women in the sorority, but we learn next to nothing about them, except for this sister, who's lost her Diva Cup.
And I can't find my Diva Cup.
How do you lose a Diva Cup?
With abandon.
Riley goes to class, and we meet Professor Gelson, Carey Elways. Yes, it's that guy from The Princess Bride and Saw. Gelson is giving a lecture and tricks Riley into a spot of sexism when he asks her a question about the text that he's reading out to the group.
The very language and logic modern woman uses to assail patriarchal culture were the invention of men. Now, who here can tell me what they think this writer is trying to suggest? Mister.
I think that he's saying that women think with their instincts and men think with their brains, and that women live in men's worlds whether they like it or not.
You said he. What makes you think the author is a man?
He then complains about her friend Chris trying to get him fired regarding the classes that he teaches. And not to get too political in this already politically charged film, but here's the problem with the broken logic of students trying to insert new classics into the curriculum. Firstly, there's a syllabus that has to be followed. There's no point in trying to get a lecturer to change the reading if that text doesn't appear in the test that you're being trained to answer. A classic is defined by its survival over time, and as terrible as it is that it's happened, a suppressed text has not proven its longevity, and so can't be considered a classic in the true sense of the word. It's unfortunate, but it's true. It's the only way to stop every single thing that has been published and printed being considered a classic, and everyone has to know it, and everyone has to read it, and everyone gets tested on it. There has to be a bar. There has to be something to strive towards. And it's sad that people, for various reasons, weren't judged by the same standards as others.
Sorry about that.
Anyway, Riley pokes around a frat house prior to the performance that they're doing there for some reason.
The power of the founder compels you to pledge your loyalty to DK.
She stumbles across a hazing, or is it something more sinister? Yes. Yes, it is. She then stops one of her sorority sisters from being forced into sleeping with one of the frat guys.
Will you promise you're going to text me as soon as you get home?
And then leaves her there. In that room.
Promise.
After the girls... women perform at the old fraternity of the man who assaulted Riley.
Yes, up in the frat house, one true fact.
And that is that I got attacked.
act.
From there, things escalate wildly, and the frat starts targeting the women on campus for death. Not just our main cast, but all of them, with varying degrees of success. Moving on, Riley figures out that it's all caused by the magical bust of the college's founder.
It was like they were doing something with this black stuff that was coming out of the founder's bust. It was like black magic or sorcery or something.
So you're telling me you think the DKO boys possessed their pledges in some supernatural hazing ritual?
You saw the pledge's face. You saw his blood. I don't know what he was, but he was changed. He wasn't human.
She breaks in to destroy it, and soon after is rescued by Chris and some other sorority girls. Women. A literal battle of the sexes ensues.
You messed with the wrong sisters.
Climaxing with Riley and Chris locking the frat in the basement to burn to death.
I'm so sorry. Hey, that wasn't me. They did some magic shit.
Not now!
Black Christmas was released in 2019 through Blumhouse. It was made for $5 million and returned $18.5 million. Written by Sophia Takai and April Wolfe, the former of which also directed the film. In terms of directorial credits, she hasn't really done anything in the genre before. However, she did star in the second segment of VHS. The film honestly has nothing to do with the original, nor the 2006 remake. Instead of there being one or even two killers hidden in a house picking people off, it's just a bunch of frat guys possessed by magical Prometheus black goo. In terms of the writing, it was not good. What should be the subtext of the film is just the text. There is little to no attempt at subtlety or craft applied to the film. It feels like a 16-year-old's thesis on sexism, the male gaze, and rape culture. The problem is, it wears its message plainly on its sleeve, with no nuance and no finesse.
What about the messages?
I wouldn't worry about those. Like you say, they're probably just pissed about the little show you put on. Boys will be, well, you know.
It tries to be smart and break from convention, but it just comes across as confrontational, and does not want to invite discourse on subjects that should be brought to light and discussed. Acting-wise, it's good. There isn't anything to really complain about there, but there aren't any really standout performances. It's fine. If I thought the Purge franchise's messaging was blatant, well, this blew them out of the water. Blumhouse need to start doing better with their scripts. Please, Blumhouse, do better. Please do better. The film looked and felt cheap. Not B-movie cheap, but just low grade. Honestly, not what I expect from Blumhouse. I wish that this had been a better and more refined film. Takai has implied in interviews that the film was aimed at a smaller niche audience. And that's part of the problem, because she went for that niche aggressively. Horror has always been a place where statements on society can and are encouraged to be made. And I'm all for that. However, Takai has made a parody out of this ethos by not trying to engage more people in what she was trying to say, instead preferring to alienate a large portion of her target audience. The genre has always been something of a safe place for people to explore their thoughts and feelings whilst respecting their audience. Black Christmas 2019 is just not interested in making steps towards fixing problems, but instead is more concerned with creating division.
What did you girls expect?
Woman.
Why are you allowed to say all this shit about men and we're supposed to just sit here and take it?
Because men have all the power.
Not all men have power.
Did you just not all men me?
It's obvious that the film is trying to subvert the tropes of the genre, and it does so in a heavy-handed and clumsy fashion.
Expectations subverted.
Although you can tell it's one of those movies. Clumsy and heavy-handed. If you want a better example of subversions to the horror genre, then go watch Wingard's You're Next, Alpen and Gillett's Ready or Not, or Usner's Society. Well, that's that. 3 very different versions of one film. If you made it this far, then I salute you. Would I recommend any of these films? Yes, I would. In short, Black Christmas 1974 is a classic, and is a great film. I actually wish I'd seen it earlier. It honestly does deserve the title of being a classic. The film was so good that it's now on my annual Christmas watch list, along with Die Hard, Home Alone, and Aliens. Black Christmas 2006? Maybe? Probably not. Unfortunately, it's totally forgettable. It's okay, but when it came to writing this review, I had to watch the film an additional 2 or 3 times because it simply made no impact on me. Even with the increased violence and gore, it was just a thing that I watched. 2019? Oof, no. Definitely give this one a miss. The sad thing is, I can see hints of what could have been an important, necessary movie, but it fails to meet its potential in so many ways. And I'm done. I'm ending it here before I incur the wrath of the internet gods for having an opinion. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. Have you seen any of these films? If so, then drop your thoughts downstairs in the comments section. Remember to take care, stay weird, and most importantly, stay spooky. Thank you for watching. Happy holidays. Bye bye now.